is actually pretty special to us because at the RailsConf Portland was the first time WomenWhoCode had a booth there, and we wanted to raise awareness for WomenWhoCode and what we were up to, and we also wanted to explore the idea of expanding on an international level. If many of you are new to WomenWhoCode, it's an organization that inspires women to excel in technical careers, and we do that through various different programs. So we actually, our first international expansion effort was in Colima, Mexico from the Portland event, and we have been at RailsConf ever since, so it's near and dear to our hearts. And that was actually the first Rails conference I went to, and that was the first time I heard about Sandi Metz.
No need to say anything about that.
So we'll get started the WomenWhoCode way. So there's a silly question that we like to ask at the beginning of each event. And so I'm going to ask that Sandi Metz answer it first, and then I ask that you ask it to the person to the right of you. Or not ask it, answer it. So what's your favorite flavored barbecue sauce?
I like the spicy ones, not the sweet ones. Is that enough? And I'm from North Carolina. Okay, so they have the old vinegar thing. All right. Okay. Is that like adequately answered?
That's okay. Yes.
Like South Carolina usually puts like South Carolina barbecue. They usually use like honey and spice, like a mix of it. That was cute. Were you here based out of Atlanta?
All right. You guys are being loved.
This is an interesting question, it sounds like. So there are two empty seats in the front. Don't be shy.
Speakers love you. I'm going to make you come, if you're at RailsConf, I'm going to make you come sit in the front tomorrow. You may as well start practicing. They're going to hold out. There are really two seats. All right, you may.
Okay, I'll probably roll into you for some.
Yeah.
When you get tired of standing, your seat's in the front.
All right, so we'll get started. Sandi, what led to your interest in programming?
So now I have to put the clock on myself, sorry. I got into programming entirely by accident. I'm a woman of a certain age. I was a music student at Florida State University. Turned out that wasn't going to work out. I was involved with someone who had done some programming for Bell Labs. He knew about VOTEC schools too. I didn't understand about VOTEC schools. That was the prehistoric version of code school. Right? That was what VOTEC schools were. So I thought I might do drafting. They had that at the VOTEC school. I needed a job. So when I was at the VOTEC school, I took the little pretest. They got in touch with me 3 days later and said, you should be in data processing. And I said, wow, that sounds cool. And so I had a big fight with them at the VOTEC school. And I insisted. It took a long time for them to agree to let me be in drafting. And I went home and I talked to Jack, and he said, And then about 4 hours later, he said, we were washing dishes. He said, I think you'd be good at data processing. And I was 20 years old, so I said, okay. And I called him and said, okay. And yeah. So I went, at VOTEC school, it's a little bit like code school. So I went in on the morning of day one, I wrote a Fortran program on an IBM 370. I punched some cards back in the day, and it was a miracle. Isn't that amazing? Your first computer program, do you remember writing it? It's like, how can this work? It felt like you should be able to take the machine apart and look at the parts making it happen, right? It was very hard to trust that it would work, but I was absolutely, completely addicted from that day. That was 1978, maybe? I don't remember. Would have been back in that era, before 1980. And I've been writing code ever since. I feel so lucky, right? I get to dress like this, I get to be kind of grumpy. Like, I don't know what I'd have done for a living all these years had I not been writing code. So, and I say that really, I wanted to tell that story instead of answering the other question we did, colluding against you. Because I suspect that many of you are getting into programming via non-traditional ways. And that door is still open, right? And it's not, okay, now I'm going to be careful about the rant here. It's not always easy. When I started, there were lots and lots of women in programming. Everywhere I went, the bathrooms had lines. Everywhere you worked, there were women. Seriously, and it was much easier because there was no thought that it was like math-linked or gender-linked. And so over the arc of my career, the 35 years that I've been writing code, it peaked and then fell, and there's a bunch of reasons. Like, we can go on and on. We can have a long discussion about why that happened. But I am 100% confident that you can do this job, and that there's a place here for you, and that you'll love it. And so there's a bunch of other things going on in the world right now, but you should not let that deter you. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Let's have fun. So
Sandi, how did you, or when did you realize that you had a love for patterns and design?
Always, I think, right? Okay, so I have a very deep failing, and that is that I have incomplete filtering in my brain, right? And so it turns into the unlikely connection between apparently unrelated things, right? It's a coin that has two sides. Like, I have to be a little careful. Like, I deliberately did not have a drink before this, because I have to be a little careful about my internal editor, because I can say things that are a little inappropriate, right? I have to watch that, but at the same time, it lets me make connections. So I'm much more interested in the abstraction. The abstraction seems simple to me. The concretions are what seems hard, and I love understanding the shape of the whole from the details. That's much simpler to me. And I know everybody's not that way, right? Some people are just the opposite. Like, some of you may know the name Katrina Owen. She's a refactor. I teach with her deliberately, because she is the absolute opposite of me, right? She understands things from the bottom up. She assembles the whole out of parts, and I derive the parts from the whole. And so patterns come really naturally to me. It seems, of course, like, isn't that obvious? Can't everybody see that? Yeah.
So, simple code, you believe in it. What's your definition of it?
I teach now for a living, and I give them this heuristic. This is a metric. It's something I call the inebriation test. Here's how it works. You've been out to the bar and maybe you've had a few drinks, and you're on calls, your phone rings, and you have to look at code you did not write. And if you can understand it, it's simple enough. Very often when I find that both with me and with the senior people have the worst time with complexity. We love being clever. Yeah, I mean, you can feel it in your brain how attractive cleverness is, right? Like in my classes, when I get to metaprogramming, everybody wakes up. They all want to write that metaprogramming code they're going to hate themselves for. And so the real challenge is to turn that around in your head and say that if I was really smart, I could write simple code. If I was really smart, I could write code that drunk children could understand. And that's my metric. The right abstraction is easy. The code seems inevitable when you look at it. And that code can be very, very hard to write. And it's code you're a little bit embarrassed about later, right? You show people, you say, well, I spent a week on that. It doesn't really look like it. Yeah, so simple is hard. And but it's worthwhile, and you should strive for it.
How many iterations do you usually go through on a certain project before you feel comfortable about it?
Well, okay, there's perfect, which never gets done, right? Which means you never ship. I mean, often, like, I have a lot of experience, right? I've been writing code a long time. I do one iteration on the whiteboard with sequence diagrams. And that saves me a lot of time and trouble. And I know it's a thing that was new to a lot of people. Like, if you've looked at POODIR, who knows what a sequence diagram is?
You said a sequence?
A sequence diagram. Yeah, so not everyone, right? So there's a little, like if you're writing object-oriented code, there's a kind of drawing that you can make that will let you figure out what your objects are and what messages they're sending back and forth. And once you do that, everything else is an implementation detail. And if you're sitting down, if you're trying to do TDD, like they say, okay, now I'm going to have another answer. You're not giving me a microphone. So TDD is really hard, but part of the reason TDD is so hard is because they say, well, it's test-driven design. Design will evolve. But really, you've made a million decisions by the time you decide what to assert first in the first test. You've done a lot of design work, and those people who tell you TDD is easy, it's because they know a lot of design. And that is absolutely not helpful to people who don't know a lot of design, right? And if you're sitting there frozen with your hands on the keyboard trying to figure out what comes first, the way to figure out what goes first is to go to the whiteboard and get a friend and go to the whiteboard and draw sequence diagrams. And if you do that, then you'll have a map of what objects you think you have and how they might talk. And then you can pick one and go write that. Go make an assertion about it.
Hey, remember, I know, Sandy, you mentioned that you were a COBOL programmer at one time.
Yeah,
and we
for many years. I have not yet written as Ruby for as many years as I wrote COBOL.
Yeah, okay. Remember how we used to do the pseudocode?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you think about a pseudocode, can you even imagine that as being a sequence?
You know, I can't, actually.
Okay.
And I think it's an excellent question, right? Because I think of pseudocode as being inside a method. The OO thing that's so hard, that was hard for me at least, when I went from COBOL, procedural language, to Smalltalk and then to Ruby, is the notion that I'm sending messages between objects and nothing else matters. Everything else is a detail. And I was saved. Like, UML was really impossible. And I can distinctly remember when I first saw a sequence diagram, because I've been trying to badly make up sort of some way to diagram that process for a long time. And sequence diagrams are incredibly simple. Like, I can remember the syntax for a sequence diagram. I do not know the syntax for inheritance. I do not know the syntax for composition. I don't know any of the class-based sequence diagrams in UML. I'm sorry, the class-based diagram syntax. Like, there's class diagrams in this book, and I had to look it all up on Wikipedia. and that's a sign, right? You know something about that language if you cannot remember it. Like, they were not right. But the sequence diagrams will stick if you look them up. And that solves, it gives you a way to model an application at the right level of granularity so you'll know how it might work without ever writing any code that you get attached to. And you can get a friend to do it, and you have an eraser, right? It's so easy to change your mind on the whiteboard. So I don't even remember what the question was. I'm trying to rewind the step here.
So, kind of related, how have your opinions or thoughts about object-oriented programming evolved over time? Like, maybe things you thought were a great idea a few years back, you now don't even think about?
Everything seems simpler to me now. Sorry. Like, there is a way in which things are quite simple, and if you just insist that they be so, you can almost bend the reality of your code into that shape by not being willing to write complicated code. And I say that, but I know it's hard. Like, I look at a lot of code that people write who have less experience, and they get, let me back up and say one more thing about that. Beginners write really incredibly complicated OO code, and it means that they should be commended for that, because it's really hard to keep that crap running. It's really hard. I've seen, where's Kane? Kane, raise your, okay, Kane, I went to work, I did a little consulting gig at Kane, a company that Kane was the CTO for in California, and she had some kids who were maiden named, and they got me to look at their code, and they had written something that I found it almost incomprehensible. It worked. There was like a lot of moving parts, and things went to other things, and stuff went here, and stuff went there, and it took me a long time to understand what they were doing, and it turned into a very simple problem. And so it's you have that thing where you start out in OO and you're incapable of really writing simple code, and so you have the worst, hardest possible job because you're doing hard stuff, and then it gets better from there, right? Every time you learn something, and now to me things seem pretty simple. Like I understand the patterns, I can kind of look at code, I see the shapes of codes, I'm very comfortable with ambiguity and with the abstractions, and so well, actually, I'll say one more thing. So, the original question, which I do remember, which is, what do you know now that you didn't know then, right? And one thing that I did was I could not read. I was completely untrained, and I learned OO by writing OO code, and I was unfamiliar with the literature, and I had no education in this, and I made a bunch of stuff up that I later discovered were things. Now, it's really hard because it's impossible to read that stuff. It's really hard. And I'll name you a bunch of books, right? Mark Fowler's Refactoring book. You should know that book. Eric Evans' Domain-Driven Design, right? You should know that book. All the Rebecca Worsbrock stuff. You should know those books. However, they're impossible to read. They're written for people at a very high level who have a lot of experience. They write for each other, and then they're incomprehensible to people who are not already there. And so, if you can find a way to learn from the wealth of information about how to write OO code that very smart people have written, you're going to have a big leg up. And I discovered many of the, I can remember distinctly having a talk with a woman named Jen May Wu. And she was visiting Durham, and I was having a rant about this pattern. I was saying, you know that thing where people send those messages, and then they send a thing, you send a message, and then you send a message in, you send a message in, and this is that long thing where there's, and she looked at me and she said, oh, you mean the law of Demeter. And I was like, what? I'd never heard of it. And she said, yeah, the law, then I don't know, Demeter, whatever, however you want to say that, right? The law of Demeter. And I looked at her and I said, it has a name? And so there's a lot of pain you don't have to suffer if you can manage to find some place to learn OO things. And I can't really recommend, other than my book, which I wrote for people like me, it has some of it in it, but I would just, study groups are great, right? You can take books and break them down and help each other read them. It's just kind of a translation process. So things are easier for me now, but it's because I know a lot more. And some of that I learned the hard way, and it's not necessary. You can do better and you can help each other do better. So, it was pretty easy once you get it. Easier than probably what you're doing.
Can you repeat those authors again?
Yeah, you should read the Martin Fowler Refactoring book. Okay. If you have a legacy app, which by definition is what you wrote last week, any code without tests, you should read the Michael Feathers book. It's called Dealing Effectively with Legacy Code. If you have Java, you should read the Steve Freeman and Nat Price Goose book, Growing Object-Oriented Software Guided by Tests.
Sorry, Nat
Freeman. Steve Freeman and Matt Price. It's the book, if you have Java, it's the book you should read next after POODIR. It's very readable. They're really good. They're the guys who made up, who sort of defined what mocking is. They're part of the London School of Yeah. So the Freeman, you need to learn, you have to know something about refactoring. You have to know something about testing, which the Freeman and Price book will help. Okay. I love the Rebecca Worsbrock stuff. It's Worfs, WIRFS-BROCK. She's the woman who defined the term single responsibility. That's her. Okay. Right? Responsibility-driven design, that's Rebecca Worsbrock. These are all people from the heyday of sort of OO back in the 70s and 80s, and it hasn't gotten better since. For more modern stuff, you can look at the Eric Evans domain-driven design. It's almost impossible to read, and his ideas are brilliant. There's a PDF shortened version of that. It's called Domain-Driven Design Briefly, or Domain-Driven Design Short, or something. And so understanding that's a more architectural thing. And so you should read those other books first, and you should come there. And you should not read them by yourself. You should get a book club to read them. Right? Okay. And then you'll know a bunch. Everything will get easier. Oh, actually, I left out sort of the canon of this, which would be the Gang of Four book, the Design Patterns book. It's called Design Patterns, something. Does anybody know? Who can help me?
Just Google gang.
Gang of Four.
Okay.
It's for they call it, there's all this code, right? Like the Freeman and Price book is the Goose book, Goos. And it's because the name is Growing Object-Oriented Software Guide by Tess. The Patterns book has 4 authors, so they call them the Gang of Four. So then people will say the golf book, right? And you're supposed to know the code, right? And the nice thing about the code is it's incomprehensible to begin with once you learn it. There's no POODIR. And here's the thing, this is a lesson here. Think about the acronym. Your book title is going to be. It's very nearly a disaster. I had to really work on that on the internet. Okay, so it's easy, but learn things and don't make them up. Don't do what I did and make them up. Don't make some stuff. People will tell you these things. All right, stop.
I like this. You've answered about 3 of my follow-ups.
Okay. I'm not sure whether that's good or bad.
That's great. So, integrated systems. For a few years, there has been talk about why SOA is so fundamentally important, and now DHH announced a more political savvy term to describe monolithic apps, which is integrated systems.
Is that just now it's my turn?
Yeah.
So, I do feel the need to be diplomatic, right? And so, let me say this. I agree with 99% of what that guy says. And we are not in any way in opposition. Now, we have very different styles, right? DHH loves the confrontation. I am right down the center of the Myers-Briggs test. Right? I take that test every time and it's flat. And so for someone like me, I think you're right from your point of view. That seems perfectly reasonable to me, right? There's a big continuum, it's a big tent, and we're all in it. And so and also I don't fight mean. So I'm a little careful. Like often people want me to react to things he said. All right? He says those things because he loves stirring the pot. All right? Who here is currently working on an application on which they have been working, on a team working for at least 5 years? Yeah, okay, me, right? Raise your hand, come on, let's look. So it's rare, right? So has anybody got 10 years? Okay, good, all right. So you know something about software. Right? Now, so let's go to so I said 5, 4, put your hand up when I get to you, right? You've been working on the same app for 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. Okay, there's a 3. So now we got some 2s and 1. Right, now we're getting down to the students, right? The folks who just, all right, and so you don't even want to raise your hand at all. So, okay, and the freelancers. And the freelancers, yeah. So the freelancers, now it's really about how long the app has lived that you worked on, right? And so now in this room, if you're in a situation where you work for a startup, you're in San Fran, you got VC money, and you're in this revolving door, right? You succeed or you fail, you're out of business, and all the developers got 1 year's experience, and then they all go get new jobs. And they're in that, right? And some of those companies strike it rich, and then they got a big problem because they got to figure out how to maintain that software. But there's a lot of software that just comes and goes and comes and goes and comes and goes, right? Those apps don't get very big. And they never get to deal. They never get to try to decide. They never have to live with any mistake, and the app never gets very large. In the real world, if you're not Basecamp and you're not a San Francisco startup, your app, if your business does not go out of business, your app is going to live for a long time, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I can promise you, here's what's going to happen: the next shiny thing that's not Rails is coming. Rails has taken the world by storm, and we came in the bubble. It's like we came in this filter on one end, and Rails was such a game changer that it feels like Rails is going to be here forever. I wrote COBOL. I've been writing Ruby since 2005, and I have not yet written Ruby for as many years as I wrote COBOL. Right? I have not yet written Ruby for as many years as I then wrote Smalltalk. Right? Okay. What you want your app to do is you want to be able to change part of it to the newest cool technology without porting the entire damn thing. And if you make a bet that today's framework, and I tell you what, Rails is a framework like Windows shades go up and down. That's how fast change is going to happen, right? If you cast your future on putting your business logic in controllers and in subclasses of active record, you are screwed. Now, I know that there are very different opinions about this from, say, the guys who wrote Basecamp. And I've heard the rumor, I don't know that this is true, so it might not be true. You can quote me as saying it might not be true. I'm told that one of the things that happens there is they have a big team and they rewrite Basecamp every time a new big release of Rails comes out. Right? Can anybody confirm that? I hear nods as if people believe it might be true, right? I see nods. All right, if you work for a business that's making enough money that you can throw your app away and rewrite it every 2 years, then you're not worried about framework. But most of you need your apps, you're going to go out of business if your apps can't change. And if you write big monolithic apps, it is very, very hard to change them. Now, having said that, I want small things, right? That's what I want. I want small things. I want interactive small things. There are many ways to fail at that, right? Aaron Patterson has been famously quoted as saying he likes microservices because he doesn't think his method calls have enough latency. Right? SOA was a terrible disaster. But the truth is, the abstraction here is that I heard a guy named Fred George, who's sort of famous in the microservices world, talk about a Java app that he had that was 100,000 lines of code. And they decided it was really 10,000 line apps trying to get out. And then they decided, oh, maybe it's 1,000 line apps. And they drilled it all the way down to it's a bunch of functions. It's a thing like that Jose Valen would talk about with Elixir, right? Like if the network were free and you could mount a bunch of functions and have them communicate for free, which you can't, right? But logically, this is what we would like. If the world were this way, we could write good software. Fred said he had an app that they put up like this. People would write these tiny, serious microservices, and one would be in Ruby, and then it would need to be changed, and the next guy would just throw it away and write and go. Right? All they had was an API. And so I would tell you that the holy grail of software is that, and we cannot do it today. But I would also tell you that if you do something like write a really coupled, overly large Rails app, and decide, without learning how to break it up into OO components, if you decide at that point to break it into microservices, well, that's going to fail, right? And if you do that and you fail, what you have not discovered is a new truth, right? The truth is you got to learn OO and put seams in your app, right? Clumps of behavior in your app, and then if you can isolate parts of your application, there is some chance that once you figure that out, that one or more of those isolated bits might be RESTful. You might be put up another app and use REST to get there. And so the thing, I don't know the answer because the network latency problem is a real problem. But I can promise you, if you write really big apps and your business succeeds, you're going to regret it. And Rails ain't going to be here forever. What are you going to do? Right? Yeah. So don't do big things. Lots of your big apps could be a couple of, just 2 or 3 apps, right? I mean, if you follow the principles of OO and you don't let everything know about everything else, then you can make edges that have clear APIs. And if you just look for places in your apps to do that, where everything doesn't know about everything else, and then you can have, I mean, if your Rails app could be 4 Rails apps, you'd be better off. Like that alone might be enough to save you. But just don't make one. And we agree about 99.9% of stuff. We really do. We agree very much about how to write software. we're a little bit different about how we deal with people. That's a big difference between us. But yeah, so make small things. I mean, I'm gonna stop. I haven't even had a drink and I'm about to say something about that.
Related to small things, tomorrow you'll be talking about nothing is something. Nothing is a really small thing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, everything gets simpler to me, right? I got better and better. And, okay, the book, I published a book. I had a day job. I wrote this book under duress. I did not want to write a book. And then I didn't mean what happened. And then nobody would read it while I was writing it. People kept begging me for chapters, and they wouldn't read them. And so it was very clear to me that no one would ever buy or read that book. I had very good evidence that would be true, right? And so I didn't mean to go there. So could you just repeat that question?
Can you talk a little bit about your talk tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow's talk, sorry. Yeah, tangent. Okay, so I thought, okay, I'll rewind a little bit. So I read the book, bomb went off in my life, quit my day job, needed to make a living. People were bugging me to teach, so I started teaching. And I've been teaching kind of the same problems for a year and a half. And I'm a much better teacher than I used to be, and I understand the problem. So really my job now is to think about code. And like who knew that one could ever have that job, right? I do have deadline pressure, but it's a really different kind of deadline pressure. Like my job is to figure out what makes code good and how to write good code, and how to explain how to write good code. And so I have a deep, like my understanding of OO has escalated in the last 2 years, because I have this, again, it's not really leisure because I feel incredibly behind, but my job now is to do that instead of get production code out the door. And so I thought when I made up, I'm going to tell this story tomorrow in the talk, I thought when I made up the curriculum for my course that I was teaching a bunch of different unrelated ideas. And then 18 months later, after having taught it like 20 times, I'm finally understanding that there's really only one thing. I'm teaching a single, very fundamental, simple idea about OO. And it's that everything you want to do sort of has a corollary. So let me say this. If you wrote an if statement, if you had a guard clause, right, trailing if statement, you don't just have one thing. There's always there's always an else somewhere, right? And it might be far distant in your code. It might be far away in your code. But there's two sides to everything. If you create an inheritance hierarchy, you're specializing something. The thing that you've created in your subclass is specializing a thing that exists in your superclass, even if that thing seems like nothing. Like very often we're clear about the new change we're making, but it's very hard to get your hands around the thing that it's a specialization of is also a thing. And so there's a bunch of things that happen in OO that involve things that look like no-ops. But they're really things that you have to identify and give a name and create an object for in order to have the full set of objects. Now I know that probably makes almost no sense. And I'm a little concerned about tomorrow's talk. Actually, I've given it a couple times. Well, it's because for the very first time I have a very, very big abstraction. And there's 290 slides with 510 transitions. A transition approximately every 4 seconds. It's fine, it'll be fine. It takes a lot of setup. I think I have a convincing argument. I've given the talks a couple times. And I think that it will be more clear to you about the very large abstraction by the time I'm done tomorrow. I hope. So now that you've heard, I can't really confess to how many people are going to be in that room tomorrow. But I would be very interested in feedback. Like I suspect if you are very new at OO, it's a 4-part talk, that you will hang in there through part 3. I would like to keep everybody through part 4. I'm uncertain whether I've been good enough as an explainer and as a slide maker to do that. And so I would like feedback from you. Critical, praise is great, but unhelpful. I would be very interested in how I can improve that talk. after I give it tomorrow, because I'm a little concerned that the abstraction is so big that it might be actually too big. Anyway, so there's a lot of things, there are a lot of concepts that don't represent real world things that actually are embodied in missing code as opposed to present code. And you can make objects to represent concepts that are embodied in holes in your code. And sometimes you have to do that to write the set of objects that can interact simply. Yeah, I know, it's kind of You'll see some tomorrow. I'll show you some examples of places where there's nothing in the code, but you have to create an object to represent it.
And for those of you not at Rails conference tomorrow, there will be a live streaming on YouTube.
And what advice did I give you about the live stream?
To pretend it's not there.
Pretend it's not there, but what else? I'm just not going to say it.
Do not pick your nose.
Don't pick your nose. Pick your nose. It's a live stream. And they will. And those editors are the guys that do the video editing. They will save you from any sins. But if it's a live stream, it'll be fixed.
Do you mean so? Is it like the concept of like imaginary numbers in math? You're like, we'll just call it like a thing, and then we'll work around it, even though it's not a real thing.
Well, how real is it? Like, oh, it is real.
Yeah.
Right? The absence of something can be as real as the presence of something. Like if you have an if statement that says, if it's absent, I'll do this. If it's absent, I'll do nothing. Else, I'll do something. The only way to remove that is to make an object for both sides. Right? You can see that, right? And so all of a sudden, a whole world of things, like we're physical beings, and we look at things and we say, I can model a chair and a table and a person. I feel good about that. I can even model business process, right? I can't really put my hand on it, but I can see the business process. Modeling the absence of something as if it has meaning is a much harder thing to grasp, but it's just as real. Like lack of a thing is just as real as a thing. And unless you are comfortable enough with the abstractions that you can make objects out of lack of things, then you're crippled forever in OO, because you got to do it. Otherwise, you're writing procedural code that's full of statements. That helped. Okay, that helped my explanation.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking the question. I see nods, right? People seem way less confused now. Tomorrow there'll be concrete example. I'll show it in code tomorrow, and that makes it easier to follow. We'll see. Give me feedback.
Yeah, I guess so. One question is, and you kind of alluded to it. What's your definition of nothing?
Well, nothing is something, right? There is no. Like the absence of a thing is a concept that can be modeled, right? And so, like, lots of times we think of nil as nothing, right? We think of nil as nothing, and nil is like a special kind of. Again, I'm going to say this in the talk tomorrow. Like the nil and the null object pattern, is that a thing people know? Who's heard that term? Null object pattern. Okay, so a lot of you know that. Like the null object pattern is a very tiny single concrete instance of the much larger abstraction that I'm talking about. Right? One of the things that would show up that seems like a nothing that you could make a something would be you could turn nils into full-blown objects and have them respond to the messages you want to send. But there's a lot of other things there. There are many other kinds of nothing than just nil.
So another analogy then, like it's like how in the history of math we have to invent the concept of zero.
It's a little bit like that, yes. Like zero, like it's hard to pick up a zero.
Right.
Now you can't really pick up a one either, but we're very comfortable symbolically thinking, well, this represents one, right? But picking up the absence, but without zero, you can't do our kind of math, right? You need to be able. You can't do base system math unless you have it. Yeah, it's real. It's as real as those other things, and it's a weird. You can feel some switch flipping in your brain when you think about that high level of abstraction. Like we're biologically wired to be really good at talking about people, real things, but we're the exact same problems. Like there's really interesting research on this, right? You can take a problem and put people names on it and give it to people and they can totally understand. Like there's some famous one about I'm in a bar and they're 16 and the drink's gone, right? I don't know if you've heard that. And it's a logic puzzle. But if you ask that same logic puzzle and you just put abstract terms on it, it's very hard. Actually, I'm going to do a thing tomorrow that shows you how in small talk they do conditionals without the if statement. I'm just going to let you think about that for a minute. There's no if statement in small talk. There's no case. No, there's nothing. None of that. Special syntax. Special syntax for book rooms. All right, okay, so what time is it? I feel
Yeah, I have no idea. Does anybody know?
like 7:30.
Keep talking. Just, yeah.
All right, so how would you do it? You gotta, I'll give you OOP, right? I'll give you an object-oriented language like Ruby. I need you to do conditionals, but you don't get the if statement. There's only one thing you can do in Ruby. What can you do? I can, all right, hold that thought. Don't say it if you think you know, all right? There's only one thing I can do in a no language. What do I say? I just want to send a, I can send a message to an object, right? That's all you got. So you know it involves sending some kind of message, some kind of object, right? And so it's easy to do this. Actually, this is an example of a thing that's very hard in the abstract that's easy with people. So tell me, do you mind giving me your name?
K-Woo.
K-Woo. So give me your name.
I'm Greg.
Greg. Okay, so I got K-Woo and Greg up here, right? And so I'm going to implement an API on the two of them. Okay, here's the API. Is K-Woo, is Greg. This is they both know this message. They play the role of K-Woo or Greg, right? And if I send, in her implementation of is K-Woo, if I say is K-Woo and pass her a block, she's going to, if I pass you a block, what are you going to do?
What's that? Yield to the block?
Sure she will, right? And I'll say, if you're K-Woo, yield to the, evaluate this block, right? So she's going to evaluate. If I say, are you Greg? What are you going to do about the block?
Ignore it.
Right, of course, because she is K-Woo, she's not Greg, okay? And Greg implements the same API, right? But in is Greg, where K-Woo ignores the block, if I pass a block and I say, are you Greg?
I'll return true.
He's gonna evaluate the block, right? And if I say, are you K-Woo, and pass him a block, he's gonna ignore the block, okay? That is perfectly sensible, right? You don't have any trouble understanding that she's going to evaluate the block if she's K-Woo, and he's going to evaluate the block if he's Greg. She's going to ignore the block if she's Greg. He's going to ignore the block because he's not K-Woo, right? Substitute true class and false class.
Yeah, I have a question. Is it more like, just to understand what you're saying, is it more like instead of doing a conditional, you're going to send two messages to both?
What could I do? And now in Ruby, I would have to chain them together. So let's substitute K-Woo for true class. And is K-Woo for is true. And is Greg for is false. So true class, what is true class going to do in the is true method when I pass a block? It's going to yield to the block. And the true class's implementation of is false is going to ignore. And Greg is now false. Sorry, Greg. I don't know, there's something that kind of seems more positive to me. False is perfectly useful, yes. Now you can see it's easy with people, but it's hard. The abstraction is much harder than just plugging people in. But if I have those methods, I don't need if. I don't need case, I don't need else. Right? I know, isn't it? It's okay. So I just told you that story as a to make your mind sort of blow up. And so you have this thing. I can see you're having this flippy thing, right? Like one thing seems really simple, and then you're like, whoa. And that getting to where all the things like that seem simple is learning OO. Right? And it feels weird to begin with, and then later I'm just like, yeah, I like it. It's really it. Right? And so it gets easier. But getting writing good OO code means dealing at that higher level of abstraction. And you just need it with practice. You'll see that example here when I talk tomorrow.
All right, so now writing. You've got 2 new books coming out, and one is almost beta, and you're co-authoring it with Katria Owen, who you mentioned earlier that she's a refactoring guru and a really good pair because she's the complete opposite. What are your goals with this book? And you want to say this? Okay. And the book title is 99 Bottles.
And I gave away all the stickers. Unfortunately, I think I gave away every sticker today. Okay, code responsibly. That book, okay, I'm teaching classes. I'm booked through December. I've raised the price by 50% in the last year. I've priced myself out of the market of normal people. And I hate that. And I don't really know what to do about it, right? I have to throttle. Right now I'm throttling by telling people, like, you can have me in December. And so I've done both, right? The lead times are really long, the price is really high. That course, I so understand the content of that course that we are writing a book about the first 2 days of it. That's what's going on. We're trying to bring that content to people who cannot afford the course. And so it's a good thing. And the book has actually been interesting. There's more high-level ideas in that than we managed to teach during the course because people are doing exercises. So I think the book is actually going to be better. And it has some new ideas in it. I don't know. It remains to be seen, right? You can't tell. It could be a big bomb. Maybe I will read it. There's some big ideas in it that I'm really pleased with. Actually, I have to say, I'm getting. I hate that self-published crap book. So I have like editing and a cover and art and all that. We're doing all that. So it's gonna. I'll be proud of it whether or not anybody ever wants to read it. So we'll see. The beta will be out soon. If you want details on that, there's a mailing list. So if you Google like 99 bottles book. Or I realized on Monday before I came to RailsConf that I ought to actually buy 99 bottles of OOP. And I did that Monday. So that may be a Google search term. Anyway, so that's coming soon. I'm actually supposed to also be writing a book on Rails with Sarah May, who knows a lot about Rails, much better Rails than me. We're not really actively working on that because of 99 bottles book has to get done first. So that will there's a lot of demand for that book. We'll get to it. It'll happen, but it's not going to happen this year.
So you went from 0 to 3, and in terms of how many books you've written or are about to write. And I actually just finished reading Amy Poehler's first book. She's a comedian, and most of the books described how difficult writing is and how hard it is. And I mean, it was funny. And during your MagmaConf keynote, which you also gave at a RubyConf, you also discussed how hard writing your first book was. So tell us a little bit about these next few books and that process.
I hate writing. It's horrible. Are there authors here? Does anybody? So how was it? Did you?
I hated it.
Yeah. It's just absolutely brutal. And it's that kind of thing where you decide you want to write it down, and then you tell people, and then you feel like you're going to be embarrassed forever if you quit. Seriously, let's be honest. It's very pleasing. Someone told me once that a lot of people want to have written a book, but very few people want to actually write one. And I can understand that, right? So it's just hard. For me, it took a while for me to. I don't know if POODIR sounds goofy to you. If there are any parts of it seem goofy, they wanted me to be serious. They wanted me to have like an academic tone, and I just it doesn't. It's not. I just couldn't do it, and I finally realized, well, I don't want to write this book anyway, so I'm just gonna do what I want. What are they gonna do? Like tell me I can't write it? And so finding a voice and feeling. Owning my voice, owning that voice, right? And it's a little goofy, I know. And I don't care, right? I couldn't do it otherwise. And so there was something incredibly liberating about embracing I'm just gonna be goofy if it's goofy. I'm just gonna say it. And I get tweets all the time, like somebody will be in a coffee shop and they'll tweet me some sentence out of the book, which I meant to be like sneakily droll, like evilly droll, and he'll say spewed coffee and sent me that, and so it totally worked. But when I was writing is hard enough if you don't own your voice. I would say that, right? It's bad. It's just work. So you just have to make everything you can bend to make it your own way. You should just do it. Like, because really, What are they going to do? Not buy your book?
So, how do you decide what to write about?
I feel like I only write about what I'm made to write about. You know, so, okay, let me say this. Like, I want you all to give talks at conferences. Let's start there.
Yeah.
Right? And the question, as soon as I do that, and when people are saying, oh, well, I don't have anything to talk about. What have I got to say? Nobody wants to hear anything about me. And I can tell you who wants to hear what you have to say. Right? Somebody, well, I can tell you exactly. You have a perfect audience. And it's the you who did not know the stuff you know now. You're just so perfect for that person. Right? You are. You're absolutely perfect for the you that you used to be. And the nice thing about that you is they're a very sympathetic reader. Right? They're incredibly grateful for you taking the time to write things down. And so you don't really have the problem with conflict. Don't do this, right? If you look in the world and you judge yourself by all the people who know more, that's an awesome thing because it's motivating, right? You want to be better, you want to learn things. But if you keep yourself from doing things in the world because there are some people who know more than you, you will never do anything. Right? You're striving for the people to be like the people who know more than you, but you're creating content for the people who know less. And so you have a thing to say right now, and you should just say it. And again, I hate the writing. I hate doing it. I feel like when I wrote this book, it felt so obvious to me. It was very hard. Like I worked very, very hard at how to explain things, but it seemed apparent. And everyone that I could think of that might read it already knew it. And then no one would read it, right? So I got like lots of feedback that was not going to work out. And then lots of people love it, right? People really love it. And whatever the thing you know now, there's someone who really needs you to write it down and tell them, or needs you to go to a conference and give a talk. And do it. So, make it happen. The other thing, and we're here at a Women Who Code event. The other thing that's really true is that perception is reality, and that if we change the ratio of people on stage, it will change the ratio of the audience. And so if you care enough to come to an event like this, and I'll tell you this, right? They bugged me for years to write this book. The winning argument, the argument that was finally used on me was twofold, right? You use open source software and you don't get back, and there's not a woman in the Ruby, there's not a Ruby book with a woman's name. That's why I wrote the book. I like my house, I like my bikes, I like my bed, and I'm here tonight because that issue is important to me. And I suspect that if you're here at this event, you care too. And it means that you got to do the thing. And don't let insecurity about who will judge yourself against the right people. Someone needs your help. You should do it. I do, my version of open source work is looking at people's talks on Fridays. If you care to give a talk at a conference, I will get in a hangout with you and help you with it. Right? I expect to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, you actually answered the very last question a while ago, toward the beginning of the talk. So I think this is a perfect way to end the questions on my end. Do people have any more questions in the audience? And I just want to say thank you very much for being the first to ask a question, especially during the interview.
Oh, okay.
That was awesome.
So you're talking about group talks at conferences. For someone like me, I'm considered a senior engineer, and it's part of my job to talk to more junior engineers. And so I'd love to get up and talk at conferences, but I'm super nervous.
Yeah.
Like, how do you get
Totally.
over it?
So did you ever hear that? Super nervous conference, puking, they're gonna kill me, right? I was like literally in the puking zone. It was a miracle I did not throw up before my talk. So here's what I can tell you, right? There's good data about how that works, about strategies you can use, like why human beings are nervous when a bunch of eyes are on you, and strategies that you can do with it. So there's science, right? First thing you can go learn the science, and I can give you, there's a great book called Choke, How to Profile. Now it's Oh, it's really alarming name, isn't it? It's a book about how human beings work under pressure, so how you can perform at a high level even when you're under stress. And it's all data, it's all science. That's one thing. The other thing I can tell you is that it's never as bad again as the first time. Like I did not. Now that when I think back about tonight, it never occurred to me to be nervous. Tomorrow, before I get on stage in that big room, I'll have like one, boom, that jolt of adrenaline. But it's like you're ready. It means I'm ready, and I like want them to get out of my way and let me up there. Like as soon as I have that feeling, I want to go, right? And so it is. It's really hard. Now some people just aren't suited, right? But here's what I would say. Like some people can never be comfortable on stage. However, everybody is terrified the first time. So there's no way to know whether you're going to get over it or not unless you just do it, right? And so there's things that really help. Practicing as real as you can helps. I've had many people tell me that they were they absolutely died giving their talk to their coworkers, and then when they got on stage at a conference, it was much easier. And so I would really urge you not to judge how nervous you are based on talks you give at work. There's something weird about, like this is a pretty intimate thing. At a conference, you're up on a stage, and very often there's a spotlight in your eye, and you get up there and you can feel the goodwill. And as long as you're this is what I would say, if you're well prepared, if you're visibly well prepared, the audience will love you and they will so root for you if you're nervous. And you can really feel it. It's like they've picked you up and carried you. If you are not well prepared, they do want to kind of kill you. Right? And so don't take advantage of, don't abuse your audience by not being ready. We can talk more about that offline if you want. I would just say don't decide in advance that you're too nervous to do it. I submitted to my first CFP at 11:59 on the night of the cutoff. And I just wanted to not do it. I really wanted to not do it. And they had asked me to submit. And it was people who were looking for women. And then I was like, I don't want to do it. And then I just realized I would hate myself forever if I didn't have the guts to do it. And then they took it. And so now I'm making a talk, right? I'm going to New York City and giving a talk at Garuko. It was horrible. I spent months working on it. I researched slides and fonts and everything. I'm an obsessive over-prepared. And so I don't think you could be more nervous than I was the first time I gave a talk. And yet now I'm really unfazed. I kind of like it. It's cool.
And as a side note, WomenWhoCode would love for you to give your first talk at a WomenWhoCode event. So let us know when you're ready. I saw a hand go up over here. Okay. And I'll pass around the mic.
I understand that may be outpriced for your classes, but I'm wondering where do you teach and when?
I'm actually doing a public course in New York City in October 19, 20, 21st. Seats are going to be like $2,200 for single seats. There are group discounts. You know the person who's in charge of discount codes. So if anybody that wants to come to New York, I can make a discount code for a WomenWhoCode. Courses, most of the courses I teach are private courses. So they're behind the firewall in some business. Somebody calls me up and asks me. So, again, I'm not trying to pitch that tonight. I'm way overbooked for that. But it's hard for me. I'm having a really hard time finding a way to continue to reach the people like me. I'm just kind of priced out of the market. I don't really know what I'm going to do about that. But come to New York. You love it. It'll be fun.
Okay. When you talk about TDD design, do you feel like it's a good concept that's going to stay around? And do you feel like that you really have benefit from the whole process of TDD?
TDD has won the battle, and I have, but I sucked at TDD when I first started doing it. TDD, I went from being an incredibly productive programmer to being unable to get anything done overnight, right? And so it's one of those things where every new good idea, it's like we cargo cult them, right? So people, you look out on the one, you say, well, they seem smart, and they say I should do this, so I'm going to go try. And then eventually you have to decide whether it's a cool joke, or whether there's something to it, right? Either they're lying to me or I'm not good enough at it. And so I find now that my code is vastly improved. When I write code that does not have tests, when I go retrofit test on it, I always find bugs. And I find that stunning. The other thing that I do now, it has really improved my ability to do OO, to do good object-oriented design, because boy, you can make a bunch of small objects, right? I make seas of collaborating small objects, and I just don't even really remember how they all work, and it does not matter, because my tests run. And so I can parse things at a very fine unit testable level. So TDD is a good thing. You should, it's really easy to write too many tests of the wrong thing and have your test cost you money. Most places aren't like that. When they do that, eventually they quit running the tests. And so I can promise you that if you get good enough at tests will save you money, but you're always looking for that sweet spot. I don't test everything. Many things don't need testing. All right, so we're not like crazy about it. We're just doing what saves money. So we're looking for that sweet spot.
So can I follow up and ask you, so when you were in that zone of, wow, I went from being super productive to sucking,
Getting nothing done.
Like what kept you going? What kept you?
I believed in the people who were saying TDD was a good idea. And I went, like all this, I did, I won't even go there yet. At some point you got to decide, right? And actually I worked at Duke University then. I made the transition no one else did. And it was a place where people thought it was good enough, right? The bosses thought it was good enough. The other programmers thought it was good enough. I don't know. We want to do better, right? And when you look out in the world and you see people who seem really smart and they seem to be writing good code. The nice thing, now in GitHub, you can find examples of good code and good tests and teach yourself a little bit. That 10 years ago, we were just kind of winging it. I did a bunch of terrible things. I wrote a bunch of bad tests. What do you do, right? We want our software to work, and it had bugs in it.
Hi, I'm very new to coding and computer programming, but everything I've heard today, I've really been interested in it. The most I've done is get a pop-up box to kind of talk back to me, so that was really exciting. That was really, really exciting. So my question to you is, I have kind of a loud voice as it is, but my question to you is, what is the best language to learn, your first language, and then kind of go from there?
Whatever language you have at hand that you can do something in that you're interested in. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't hurt you to start with JavaScript. It wouldn't hurt you to start with Ruby. Mm-hmm. I would pick something that has a big market, not something that has a narrow market.
Okay.
Right? So I probably should start with Rust. Well, I won't even name all the things, whose names you shouldn't probably even know right now. Learn some JavaScript, learn some Ruby. Mm-hmm. Go from there.
Cool. Thanks.
And just so we're all on the same page, we have about 8 minutes left. And I'm going to go to this side to pass the mic around. I think, are there some questions on this side? Oh.
Hey. So I was really inspired to hear your story of all the new things that you've picked up over your career, because my parents are actually both engineers, and my mother is always trying to scare me with you think it's so great now, and someday they're just gonna replace you with younger
job's going away.
people. You always have to learn new things. I'm but learning new things is fun. But at the same time, I'm not someone I don't stay up till 3 in the morning on the weekend coding for fun. It's my job, and I like my job, but I have a life too. So I was just wondering advice you have.
I would say don't get sucked into that thing where teenage guys do nothing but write code and judge yourself by that.
Yeah.
Right? I don't do that. I mean, it's more important to have a commitment to learning than it is to write code 80 hours a week. That's crazy talk. I don't want, we don't want that. I reject that reality. The reality that says that I'm not a real programmer unless I do my day job all the time and give up my entire family life to do it. I think that's unbalanced. I think those people write bad software. I think they don't survive in the world. And because the dominant culture sets the norms, right? I have a psychology degree. That's what happened to me eventually after tech school. Right? Because the dominant culture sets the norms, it's really easy to get in situations where it feels like that's truth, but it is not truth. And anybody that's been a boss can tell you, anybody that's done real work in the real world, that only seems like truth when you get inside the mirrored bubble of those ideas. So just don't even, right? Don't feel like you have to do that. It is not true.
So when you first got started learning OO and small talk and all that, you were doing it just as...
I did it. They decided at my day job that we were going to start writing object-oriented code. They put me in a room with a computer and they said, figure out how to get some windows to come open. That's what happened, right? It was like, how do you make it go? I can distinctly remember. We talked about going in the cave. Like you'd go in the object-oriented cave, and eventually the light would come on, and you would come out. It was a huge transition, and we made it. There was no help. It was kind of before the internet. Like we had Gopher, right? I see some heads nodding. And so I was lucky in that it was my day job to learn how to do this. But you know, most of you have or are getting day jobs where you have to learn to do this stuff. So you're good. Your goal really to be fun. Okay, if you need to go, please feel free. Like, don't, if you're done, you won't hurt my feelings if you're leaving. Right? I'm just saying, like, go if you need to. And I haven't had a beer yet, but I think it's time. I hear there's cold beer in the fridge. Yeah, you're the man.
Okay, nice talk.
I'll see you in the morning. Yeah, I'll see you in the morning. Okay. Yeah, really, seriously. Go if you need to. I'm gonna, I'll sit here until you're done with me. Close your doors. So, was there someone else? Yes.
Hey,
just yell.
Oh,
there you go.
Hey, yeah. Anybody else? So, you mentioned a lot of like classics from like the OO world, and it seems like Small Talk and Ruby have been working in like the object-oriented languages for a while. Are there any concepts from like functional programming or anything that you find important?
Yes. Yes.
And then actually, follow up would be like, is anybody doing talk about software design from like other paradigms these days that you find interesting?
Since I'm okay. Let me answer the first question first. Right, functional programming. Wow, immutability. Gotta love that, right? No side effect. Immutability. Those things, like, we can write OO code like that right now, and we should. The whole Gary Bernhardt thing, I don't know if you're familiar with that imperative core, right? Yeah, functional core. Like, I didn't realize that I write a lot of very functional OO for those tiny objects in the center. So I think that we should steal their good ideas and use them now. Who's talking about it? A lot of people are talking about it. I don't know if I have a good reference for something to read. There's somebody who wrote something on LeanPub, like functional programming for the object-oriented programmer. Do you know that book?
It's
Brian Merrick? Yeah. I have that. It's under my pillow. I actually read it. If I bought it, I give it money.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. The whole Elixir sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot of, like, we want multi-core. We want the safety that we get from immutability and no side effects. It's hard. The multi-core stuff, I hope Matt is going to eventually put that in Ruby, so I'll get that for free in the language whose syntax I want to write. Those other two things we can do right now, we should be doing. You bet. All right. Oh wait, there's more questions. Please, you're free to go. I'm just saying, now these feelings are going to get hurt.
We love you so much, you don't want to go.
Now I'm drinking.
I think in the beginning of your book, you mentioned a part where you can tell when someone has kind of started approaching object-oriented ideas because they break silly things. They kind of break silly things into objects, or maybe it's going to be something else, or something. So when I'm programming, sometimes I'm like, is this silly? Like, am I breaking too many things into tiny little methods that aren't? And I kind of find that I don't know when I'm crossing the line, like, and going a little bit crazy and breaking small things into methods.
So here's what I'd tell you, right? Like, methods, small methods are good. Just make a bunch of methods, give them good names. This is the rule I use, right? I know that I'm wrong. That's what I know, right? I don't have enough information. Later I'm going to get it. I'm trying to choose the errors that are easiest to recover from. And it is much easier to put, if you make things that are too small, it is really easy to put them back together. If you make things that are too big, it can be very hard to break them apart. So I tend to have my direction of error be I lean toward making many small things. And then later, if it turns out that those things are pointless or useless, and what that does when you make small things is it adds levels of indirection. And too many levels of indirection makes code hard to reason about. And if you find later it's like, this is pointless, and it makes me crazy every time I look at it, then you can put them back together. Right? So make small pins. Err on the side of small until it's too small and you know. Yeah, look, see, they're leaving. They're allowed to go. I'm just saying.
Okay, so I've run into this multiple times. So it's like, for example, I'm gonna take your bike examples in the book. So when I'm writing a class, this bike, and I have like say a road bike, and I started with bike, but lately, also like after reading your book, I always have this thought like, okay, should I put it into like a base class where assuming that there are going to be more bikes, or should I put the code right now in bike and refactor it, or like make it into smaller objects when another kind of bike comes? So when do I make that decision? I always get confused at that part, like whether should I do it after it comes, or should I imagine it's gonna come, which may never come, and I'm gonna have like a base class.
So, sorry, you're wrong, right? Bet that you're wrong.
Yeah.
All right. And if you're wrong, what it means is if you, well, okay, I'm gonna say this in an entirely different way too, right? The first rule they teach you at school is dry, right? Don't repeat yourself. All right. When you dry something out, you're deciding that 2 bits of code that look identical represent the same concept, and you're giving it a name. So you're adding a level of indirection. And you're making an abstraction, right? That's what you're doing when you decide you're going to use inheritance or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Dealing with the wrong abstraction is really hard. Dealing with duplication is actually not so bad. Right, and I know it's a sin to say that out loud, but it is much, much, much easier. Like, here's the thing, people tell me, oh, I can't leave duplication. Drawing out incidental duplication as if it represents the same thing creates abstractions that make it impossible to alter your code. Right? Now, people tell me, well, I have to dry it out because the duplication is in 2 different classes and I'll forget. I'll lose track. And I'm like, okay, you know the like to-do tag? It's really easy to fix the problem of finding things that are duplicates. And it's really hard to recover from making the wrong abstraction. That Rebecca Worsbach, who I quoted earlier, she says 3, you need 3. It isn't 2 bikes that would make you make. If you have 2 bikes, you duplicate the code. If you have 3 bikes, you have enough information to know what the abstraction is. Right? Martin Fowler says the same thing in the refactored book, right? 3, and I tell you what, if you think 4 is coming down the pike, I would duplicate 3 and wait on 4. Like, I'm looking for data about what's right. And it's easy to move forward from duplication. It is hard to move forward from the wrong abstraction. I can't tell you how many shops I've been to. I go in and they have this enormous mess of code, and I tell them, well, just inline all the methods and create like huge stacks of duplication. Put it all back. And they can almost not stand that thought, right? There's this thing called the sunk cost fallacy, right? Which says, well, you know, we put so much time and effort into this, we got to keep it to move forward. Very often it is impossible to move forward because the abstraction is wrong. And as soon as you unwind it all and inline all the methods again and just make big blocks of duplicate code, it's really easy to see what's right. So I wait, despite the fact that I'm big on abstractions, I am very tolerant of keeping duplication in the meantime, waiting for more information. Yes, we'll come to you next, Micah. Yes.
So I get speaking to this. Yeah. I actually just graduated from code school on Friday, and
congratulations.
So you had mentioned earlier about how we shouldn't, or if you're a big shop, which I'm not, of course, but you shouldn't necessarily lean on active record for the long term. Now, I love active record personally. It really makes sense to me, and so I can't imagine writing a Rails app without it. But if I wanted to kind of remove that crutch, do you suggest like writing raw SQL?
No. Here's what I would suggest that you do. I have very concrete, practical advice. Right? When you new up a new Rails app, go in Model and create a subdirectory called AR, and put all your active record models namespace under AR. that change alone changes your perspective about what the center of the universe is. Right? Those subclasses of active record are bags of attributes that you're going to store in the database. The business logic, the you own model, and they should be, things that are in model can be POROs, do you know that term, plain old Ruby objects?
Sure, yeah.
Right? What I want is to create a structural thing that pushes you toward putting business logic in your own objects and using active record to manage the database. I'm not in any way suggesting that you write raw SQL. What I want is to not see concerns and callbacks in your active record subclasses. We should maybe have that talk offline, right? I don't want you're going to regret putting your business logic. Well, that's not really true. Some apps are Rails apps, right? Rails has a set of conventions. They are like Basecamp. If your app is like Basecamp, you should do exactly what DHH wants you to do, right? They've intentionally made it hard to do anything else. But if you have a different kind of app than Basecamp, what you want is to drive the edges of the framework apart. You're going to let Rails handle incoming requests from the browser. You're going to let Rails, subclasses of active record, handle persistence, right? Those bags of attributes is going to store them in the database. But there's a bunch, if you have any kind of business logic in between, you need to make your own objects and put that logic in. Your controllers ought to be new enough a service object. It's in Eric Evans' domain-driven design, right? You ought to be making a new service object, and those service objects ought to be interacting with other business objects, and they ought to be asking, those subclasses of active record, they ought to be giving them attributes and letting them save in the database. Like, Rails is not you. Your app is not Rails. Rails is a framework that does the edges, where your app sees the light of day, right, out toward the user, and where your app touches where the data gets persistently stored. And that is not business logic. All of your business logic goes in other objects that sit in the middle. Right? So yeah, I want you to use active record. I'm fine with that. What I don't want is for it to be the center of the universe. There was Micah. Do you still have a question?
Yeah. So people say naming things is hard.
Yeah, they do.
Do you have a process or something that you use and go through, like, when you're naming things, like, okay, well, just ask yourself, like, what does this do? Or what will be your process?
Rebecca Worsbrock has great, she's written about that, right? So she has a whole bunch of strategies for naming things. That's one thing. Usually, if you work in an office that has 8 or 10 programmers, often there's a person there who's good at names. So very often I go ask them, right? Like use your local expert, right? For me, my strategy is often either I know a name I like, maybe I'll do that. Often I have to time box. I am not one of those people that makes the worst possible name so that it will annoy me into fixing it. Often I just make the best name I can. And then if I go back week after week after week and I don't understand what it means, I get it back. Once we figure out, oh, it's a thing, then we think, well, maybe we should change its name to the thing. It's really are you spending too much time on names? Is that why you're asking?
No, I love naming things. I think
so you're the guy, right? Okay. So you should kind of own that. Like, if you see other names in your shop that you don't like, maybe you should be the name guy, right?
Share naming, but
I mean, don't lord it over them. Yeah. So I have a big interest in names too. Like, here's what I do when I write code. Like, when I'm all done, all the tests pass, and it's completely finished. The very last thing I do before I do the commit is I just walk through my whole change set and I fix the names. I say, what story is this going to tell the next person who works on the code? And I really work on the names at that point. And so, care about names really would be the advice I'd give you. Yeah, like that advice is wasted on you because obviously you're right. Names are, like, your implementation details don't mean anything. Right? The names that you give things to. And the more small methods you make, the better your name's got to be. Okay.
Okay, we're going to try to wrap it up.
There you go.
We're going to try to wrap it up. Maybe one more question if anybody has it.
I'll turn this back on.
I got a question.
I'm not in charge of picking who.
Elena gets to ask any question she wants.
I'll be real simple. Would you recommend Chris Pine?
That book is fine. If you're aware that book is going to tell you things, you should read it. Absolutely. Yeah. Start there. That's a good place. Yeah, that's a good. It's a learn to program code book. It's kind of procedural, but it'll teach you the syntax for Ruby, right? So it's not the last book you'll read. It might be the first.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. It was such a
close out with asking if you have any words of inspiration for the Women Who Code community.
Have I not been inspired?
Just do it.
You have a right to be you. That's what I tell you. And I know the world, that you get a lot of information from the world, maybe some of you, especially in the places that you're working. And so don't, like you're going to have to help each other believe that. If you're in a place that is not, that feels invalidating, you're either going to have to get outside validation or you're going to have to leave. And that is not, they're not real. We are real. This is real.
So you recommend reading?
I think some places can't be healed by us. Right? I mean, sometimes they can, but they can't. Like, don't be alone. I think that's the advice I'd give you. Don't be alone. Like, everybody's here. We're here. You know, they're not right. We're right. Yeah. Okay? Just do it. It'll be fun. I have two books. Okay, so well, here you go. Look, how easy was that? Right? Okay, now we're gonna have to do this. Wait, okay. You send me an email. I'm gonna give a book to someone back. There we go. That's, as they say.